Привет, Peter. Добрый день. Hello, my name's Leсли Sтрит. I'm a football historian in Australia. I write about football stadiums in particular and the history of grounds and their social history and the management of stadiums and how they relate with fans in the cities and all that sort of stuff. I'm currently writing a book at the moment on football grounds that have been used for the National League in Australia. So that's the current A-League and also the previous NSL that was in operation. So far for the book, there's been 115 grounds used in Australia, plus New Zealand for the NSL and the A-League, with new ground developments coming up online shortly. In the next few years, we'll see that number increase a bit. But that's what I'm doing at the moment, in addition to travelling all around watching the Socceruz as well. Oh, the Confederations Cup was fantastic. It surpassed all my expectations of what I expected. I was there for the group games and also a semi-final as well. So I went to Sochi, I went to St. Petersburg, Moscow, and then also Kazan. So I got to go to all the host cities for the 2017 Confederations Cup. Got to watch Australia play in their group games, and then also went to the semi-final as well, where I saw Chile and Portugal. That was a great experience as well.
Out of the four cities, which one did you like best?
I'd probably have to say I liked Moscow the best. It was just amazing to be there, walking into Red Square for the first time and thinking all the history that's happened throughout Russian Federation, the Soviet Union, and also Russia previous to the government of the Soviet Union coming into existence. Just walking in there, seeing the church, the Kremlin, the GUM department store, and just it felt almost being surreal. It felt surreal being in that environment because I had to sort of pinch myself. It was funny, I kept on, as I was walking into Red Square, I kept on having the tune of the Moscow song by Genghis Khan that was used by the Channel 7 for the 1980 Moscow Olympics as their theme song. It actually was, I think it may have even been #1 on the charts in Australia in 1980. Like most people around the world would probably know that song as a German song because it was done by a German dance group called Genghis Khan, I think. But Australians sort of like pirated and did an English version, and every time I go to ex-Soviet countries, I always have that song in my head. I remember when I went to Tajikistan for a World Cup qualifier in 2016, walking to the stadium from the main street in Dushanbe, I kept on having the Moscow song in my head as well. So whenever I'm in that sort of like, in that sphere, I always have that song as my sort of theme song in the back of my head. But Moscow was probably my favourite city. In terms of stadia, I'd say Kazan was my favourite stadium to go to. It just, probably surprising because it's if I'm correct, it's the oldest out of the four stadiums. When I mean old, it only opened like 2014 or 13, but I found that to be the best stadium in terms of spectator amenity, viewing, also getting concessions, so drinks and beverages. I know at big tournaments like Confederations Cup and the World Cup, it's always important to have a beer nice and quick. And I know I remember at Kazan at the stadium there, the Rubin Stadium, you got a beer almost immediately, which was really good. Unlike at St. Petersburg, I remember having to wait quite a while at St. Petersburg for a beer, maybe because it was the largest stadium out of the lot. But all the cities were great. I just had a ball at each one. So I feel bad for saying Moscow's the best because I enjoyed every city I went to and the experience was good. I remember at the time I got interviewed a few times for TV and newspapers whilst I was in Russia. I got interviewed on Sochi TV and also, where else was it? Somewhere else. I can't remember. It happened a few times, but just people were saying, oh, what's your experience? What are you going to say to people back in Australia? And I would say, come to the World Cup. Might be a bit too late now if you've missed out on tickets during the ballot, but you never know, the last phase, you could still get one.
Yeah. You visited some other stadiums besides the Confederations Cup, the official ones.
That's right, yes.
Can you say a few words which ones you visited?
Yeah, when I was in Moscow, because I had quite a bit of spare time, I did my usual thing whenever I go to a new city is I go ground hopping and I visit the stadiums. So when I was in Moscow, I went to the Lokomotiv Stadium, CSKA Stadium, the Dinamo Stadium, but even though that was half under construction, so it wasn't really finished. Went to Luzhniki. walked around that. They were doing quite a bit of construction work on that as well. So, but I was able to get really close, which was surprising. I was expecting that whole Olympic Park precinct to be closed pretty much, but I was able to go there. And then where else? One of the stadiums I went to, which was pretty much by chance, I actually noticed it when I was walking from Siska Stadium to the Metro, or to Dinamo Stadium. I actually went past the stadium. It's an indoor stadium. It was, I think it's part of the Siska complex where they play basketball and all that, but it's an actual indoor football stadium that holds about probably 4,000 people. The reason why I know this stadium is because it was used for the final game of the 1981 Soviet Top League, either 1981 or 82, where Dinamo Minsk won the championship for the only time, and they played the game inside an indoor stadium. And I remember reading a football magazine years and years ago, I think it may have been When Saturday Comes. This is like early 2000s, and they had an article on the Dinamo Minsk winning the Soviet Top League. And I remember being enthralled by they playing the final game of the season against, I can't remember who it was against, it may have been against Spartak. But they played it at an indoor stadium, and I remember pretty much before I went to Moscow, I was like looking up online, trying to find where this indoor stadium was, because I was really curious about playing a National League game at an indoor stadium. So I did a lot of research, and I remember I came across some online article that had a match ticket stub of that game between Dinamo Minsk and Spartak. And I noticed it was in Cyrillic, and I can understand it. I'll read it and transliterate it into English. Whether I can actually understand it, that's another thing. But I can read Russian. So when I looked it up, I looked at all the words and I thought in my head what that would translate into English. Did that, and then finally I found out it was part of the Siska complex. And then found out that that was a stadium, that's where they played the game, Dinamo Minsk v Spartak. It was at the indoor stadium, and then because of that, they played there. And I was just walking along from the new Siska Stadium to the Dinamo Stadium, and I remember seeing the weird-shaped building, because it's a very brutalist style building made out of concrete. And then straight away I thought, oh, that's that stadium. So I quickly ran up the road in excitement, seeing the indoor stadium that was used for outdoor football.
Yeah.
Well, I've got lots of plans for the World Cup. I'm going to be in Russia for the whole tournament, and plus some extra time after the final in July. But I'm going to travel around to all the cities of the group games for the Sokkeruz. So that will be my plans are going to Kazan for the game against France, and then between the game in Samara against Denmark, I'm going to Volgograd to watch England v Tunisia. So that should be quite an interesting experience. I've actually seen England play a few times their national men's team before, once against the Socceroos, and then also that time at the 2010 World Cup where they got comprehensively defeated by Germany, which they didn't like at all. And they also had that goal disallowed, which actually was a goal because I was standing right in line with that. So I'll be going to Volgograd for the game against Tunisia for England. Then after that, I'm going to Samara. I'm getting so confused. Too many games to go to. Then I'm going to Samara for the Denmark game. Then after that, going to Sochi for the Peru game Australia's playing. I guess everyone's saying Sochi, but as a lot of Russians know, the stadium is actually in Adler. But because Sochi's such a large city in terms of its spread from right up the north to almost to the Abkhazia border, or to the Abkhazia border, I should say. So it's a very big city in terms of its distance. But as I was there last year, the stadium's in Adler, where they had the main stadium for the Winter Olympics a few years ago. And then after that, I'm flying. Well, my ultimate destination is Saransk for the big World Cup game between Panama and Tunisia. I think it's Panama and Tunisia. Whatever it is, it's the game between everyone wants to go to. I'm sure all the tickets are going to be sold out and everyone's going to be scalping tickets trying to see Panama, Tunisia and Saransk. But I'm going to that game. But as trying to get from the Black Sea coast to Mordovia, it's a bit difficult without going via Moscow. and a bit time consuming, but I've hatched a different plan because I've already had experience of being in Russia and being able to read Cyrillic, and then having a friend of mine meet me half of the way, who's Russian, it's going to be quite a bit of an adventure for me, which I enjoy. I'm going to fly from Sochi to Penza, and then from Penza Oblast, going to get a bus, stay the night in Penza, get a bus to Saransk, and then from Saransk, get the train to Moscow. And then almost immediately after that, I'm going to go to Nizhny Novgorod. So Nizhny, I'm there for the round of 16 game, which could potentially be Australia. So that's the reason why I purchased that ticket for that game. Although going by their form against Norway, you'd probably think Australia's got no chance in hell of making that round of 16 match. But if all the cards fall in the right place, that game in Nizhny Novgorod will be potentially Argentina v Australia. So that should be quite interesting. For those in Russia who may not know, Australia and Argentina have actually got a bit of football history behind them to do with World Cups. In 1993, Australia, as they were then part of Oceania, needed to beat the 5th place South American side in Argentina to qualify for the USA 94 World Cup. And they only went out by an own goal in Buenos Aires that Australia scored for Argentina. And that's when they had Maradona playing for them as well. He came back after a retirement, so it was all a big deal, as you can imagine, with Maradona coming back and playing against Australia. But that was the last time we've had major contests, so there's a bit of history between Australia and Argentina. So if that happens, that game in Nizhny Novgorod, I don't know if it will happen, probably not, because my initial expectations were that I thought Australia had a good chance of securing the 2nd place behind France in our group. But then after that performance against Norway, I think that's probably a bridge too far, but you never know. After that Colombia game we played recently, Australia under Van Marwijk, we might go a bit better because we've got warm-up games against Czech Republic in Austria and then Hungary in Budapest. So I'll be going to both those games actually before I head off to Moscow. But that's all the games I'm going to. I've actually got a ticket as well for a game between France and Denmark in Moscow at Luzhniki. That's exactly the same time as Australia playing against Peru in Sochi. So unless I cut myself in half, I can't go to that game. So if anyone wants a ticket to France, France, Denmark in Luzhniki, hit me up. Category A, I don't know if you like that. It might be a good ticket. But after that, I'm just going to be staying in Moscow for the rest of the tournament. I might do independent travel throughout other parts of Russia. I don't know yet, it just depends what's going to happen, but play it by ear and you never know. I'm sort of like the person that doesn't like being in the same spot the whole time, so I wouldn't mind seeing other parts of Russia, or another thing I'd like to do is go to countries around Russia, particularly countries that were part of the ex-Soviet Union, because I've already been to quite a few of them, the Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine, Kiev airport if that counts, Tajikistan, where else? I think that's it for the moment, plus Russia of course. After that, I'm just going to be staying in Moscow for the rest of the tournament. I might do independent travel throughout other parts of Russia. I don't know yet, it just depends what's going to happen, but play it by ear and you never know. I'm sort of like the person that doesn't like being in the same spot the whole time, so I wouldn't mind seeing other parts of Russia, or another thing I'd like to do is go to countries around Russia, particularly countries that were part of the ex-Soviet Union, because I've already been to quite a few of them, the Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine, Kiev airport if that counts, Tajikistan, where else? I think that's it for the moment, plus Russia of course. But hopefully I'll get to do more travel, but pretty much when I do have my spare time, I'm going to be checking out football grounds as well, the ones that I haven't been to in Moscow, plus the other cities as well. I thought both cities were great. Although, because I like to see as much as I can of Russia, I have to admit when the draw was announced, I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't get to go to other cities because I've already been to both Kazan and Sochi. But then at the same time, I thought, well, because I have been to those cities, I know what I've already done and what I would like to do when I go back again and again for the World Cup. So for Kazan, what I'd like to do is, there's a museum there that I'd really like to check out, which I didn't last time, which is, I think it's called the Museum of Soviet History. So that seems pretty interesting. And then there's also a place called a building of, I think it's called, I don't know if they call it a church, but it's like the building of universal cultures. So it's like all different religions in one building, and they've got like all towers and stuff like that, depending on what faith you have. So you might have like crosses or Star of David or a crescent star or whatever, like the Sikh, that sort of like that sword thing, whatever it is. Also, when I go to Sochi, we'll have a bit less time there than I would like, but I wouldn't mind going up to Rosakuta, which is where they had was it Rosakuta or Polyana? Yeah, where they had like the snow resort, even though there's not going to be any snow when I get up there, but you never know, considering how the Russian winter's been so far, and it's extending very late. I believe it's still a fair bit of snow now. When you think it would start to thaw out and the sun would come out, but there's no snow up there. But I wouldn't mind catching a train up there because I love catching trains and public transport. That's my other love, apart from football, is trains and transport. Because whenever I go to cities, I always just lose myself on public transport, and I find that the best way to sort of explore. So I'll catch a train up to the resort up there. There was actually, I read there was a big bungee jump. I don't think I'll do that. But there's a bridge that goes across a massive ravine where they do the bungee jump. If I get the chance, I might try and go to that and just walk across. I think you still need to have a bit of like, I'm quite good with heights, but I won't jump off the bridge, but I'll definitely walk across it if I get the chance to go up there. With Samara, I've never been there before. I'm actually looking forward to seeing the stadium, Cosmos Arena. I know Samara was the main city for the space industry in terms of where they did the development. I know they didn't actually launch the flights, the shuttles from there, because they did it in Kazakhstan, but I believe there's a massive space shuttle. It might be, I don't know if it's the actual Vostok, but they've got a big shuttle there in the city. I'd like to see that, go up close. I remember when I went to the big park in Moscow. Is it NKVD? Is that right? And the big exposition on the north side of the city. Oh, that could be it. Yeah. Why don't we say NKVD? That doesn't sound right. It's VDN. Yeah, that one. I went there and I saw like they had planes and they had the space shuttle there as well, and all the pavilions of the republics. So I remember seeing the shuttle there, and I remember hearing about Samara. They had that as well. The other thing about Samara, here they have a beach on the bank of the Volga. Like, I'm not really a beach sort of person, but if it's a nice sunny day, you never know, it could be over 30 by that stage. I might go to the beach. I don't know if it's actual sand though, or if it's stones. If it's stones, I'm like,
no, it's sand.
It's sand? All right. Actually, I should probably say if it was stones, I'd probably like it more, because I'm not really a fan of sand. It's like artificial football grounds. You walk across it, you get the little rubber pellets. With me, I hate getting sand in my feet. So that's what I'll probably do in Samara. Of course, go to as many pubs as I can. Drink beer, try the food. I like eating Russian food. It was funny, I have a funny anecdote from the Confederations Cup when I was there. My friend overheard a comment by someone from, I think they were from, where were they from? I think they may have been from Chile, which probably makes sense because they were there for the tournament. And they said to this lady, he goes, oh, why Russian food must be healthy. And then the lady goes, oh, why is that? And he goes, oh, because all the women in Russia are slim. So I remember that anecdote. Probably wouldn't go down well in Australia, but I think in Russia it'd probably get a few laughs. What else? Yeah, try the food, try the beer. Just really enjoy myself. One thing I'd like to do this World Cup, which I haven't in previous World Cups, is try and watch the other intermediate games. Because I know, unfortunately, when I was in Brazil for the last World Cup, I was actually sick for a lot of the tournament. So that sort of didn't really make my experience as good as it should have been. So hopefully I won't be sick when I'm in Russia, and I'll get to enjoy watching the game, but also do a lot of tourism as well.